Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we open up PictoChat and type out the ABCs of Nintendo DS. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great. Still expressing the same feelings that I had on Tuesday, where it's great to be back. But
sounds like there's a but. Yes,
well,
there.
no,
I knew it.
Not,
It's good to be back, but what?
No. Not. There's no but to being back and recording this show with you.
Yes,
but it's just like in general, I put off so many things from before.
Yes,
I left for vacation and being like, do you know what? I'm just gonna worry about that afterwards.
That's 2024 Mark's
exactly.
Right.
And now I am 2024 Mark.
Right.
And those have all become my problem.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going through some of that right now too, where I'm like, oh, this is stuff I could have been working on when like things were slow and there was like a holiday and I wasn't traveling or anything. But I didn't.
No. And I do this every year.
Yeah.
And I never learn.
But you always survive, right?
That's so true.
So like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's fine. What could you possibly be behind on? Speaking of things we could possibly be behind on, patreon.com/Nintendo Cartridge Society. You should go there if you would like to support us. And if you do so at the 8-bit or 16-bit levels, you can get access to our once-a-month episodes of miniseries that are on various topics. This year, we are starting NCS Arcade, wherein every month we are playing a game from the Nintendo Switch Online or Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack that Mark and I have never beaten before.
That's right. The first one we're going to be playing and discussing is The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. I did look it up, and it is in fact the Minish Cap.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right. So we are going back and retroactively stapling the definite article onto the subtitle there.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm super excited to talk about it. And that episode will be coming out later this month. So get in the Patreon, and you can check out that episode. Plus, we have done NCS Detective Club, where we talked about the great detective shows of television, and NCS Goes Broadway, where we talked about some great Broadway musicals. On
the subject, Mark, of NCS Detective Club, did you check out the new Monk movie that came out?
No, I haven't yet.
I haven't either. I feel like I should. Because we enjoyed Monk.
We did enjoy Monk.
I kept wanting to say Psych, even though I knew that wasn't right. They've made a couple Psych movies.
Yes, yeah.
We should check all these out.
Yes.
Also, you listeners should check out our Discord. If you would like an invitation, you can email us at nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com. When you can have fun conversations with us. Want to give a shout out to our new patron, Kyle Seaborn. Thank you, Kyle, so much. And thank you to everyone who has supported us on Patreon. We appreciate it tremendously. Also, I want to plug something. Mark, do you remember a couple of years ago when I did this thing with interviews with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles creators?
Yes.
And then I wrote an issue of Transformers.
Yes.
And then I stopped talking about doing stuff with comics at all for like years. Remember that? Well, it turns out that I am, in fact, writing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles source book. It's like an encyclopedia for the current run of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It covers almost 300 issues of the comic book series. It's coming out in 4 volumes. Volume 1 comes out in February 21st, I believe. I think we're still going to hit that date. Maybe we won't. I don't know. But if you want it, it would be a good idea to go to your comic book store and pre-order it. It is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles source book, issue 1, written by me.
Super exciting. Can't wait to check this out.
And let me tell you, the first issue, 96 pages long.
Amazing.
So, just Just expect a lot, volume-wise, quality-wise too. I mean, I think I did a good job. But all right, Mark, we are doing an ABCs today. We are doing the ABCs of the Nintendo DS. Let's dig in. Mark, why are we doing this? Why are we celebrating the DS right now?
Well, 2024 is the 20th anniversary of the Nintendo DS.
Mm-hmm.
Plus,
we got two reasons.
Plus, coming out next week is the remake of a Nintendo DS game, and
its sequel on Wii that was never released in North America.
Yes, that's right. And that is called
Another Code?
Yeah. We always get this wrong.
Yeah.
Another Code Recollection for Nintendo Switch.
Yes. And the original game is also what is the name of the first game in the Another Code recollection?
It was called Trace Memories.
Yes.
In North America.
Okay.
But it's called Another Code 2 Memories.
Got it. Okay. All right. So we've got all of that established. And maybe those will come up in our ABCs of the Nintendo DS.
I never played it, so probably not.
Hey, me neither. So same. But I do before we and I think we'll probably get into some of our specifics, some of our history with the DS as we go through the ABCs. But I think you and I both approached the DS at sort of interesting points in our gaming lives, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was kind of a that it came out, or the DS Lite was coming out as I was getting to the end of my time in college, and college was sort of a gaming dead zone for me, where I was just too busy to really too busy and too poor to really invest in games, and I just remember it and the Wii being the sort of twin things welcoming me back into gaming, being no, games can be something different than just violent shooter style games, which is what the industry had sort of become.
Yeah, I mean, definitely during the DS and Wii era, it was all simultaneously the era of the Space Marine, the bald, Space Marine and
Space Marine,
a first person or third person shooter. Everything was really desaturated.
Yes.
And but the Nintendo DS and the Wii presented a very different vision for gaming's future than what was being offered on a lot of the other consoles at the time. For me, I was heavily invested in the Game Boy Advance, and I had a GameCube and was I played Resident Evil 4 and things like that. But the release of the Nintendo DS and then the Wii, and I mean, honestly, that whole generation was a renaissance in gaming for me. I had a Xbox 360 and a Wii and a Nintendo DS, and I eventually got a PlayStation 3. You know what I mean? I was just playing a ton of video games during this era.
Yeah. Well, and I think, just it was the high tide raises all boats sort of thing, where the Wii style games that were accessible to everyone, and DS style games that were accessible to more players, just kind of made more people interested in games. And I feel just I don't know, I feel everything started to get good right then.
Yeah.
So the DS is sort of the vanguard for all of this, because it's a couple years before the Wii, which means it's also a couple years before the even Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. So I kind of view it as the first turning point in the change from the 90s to even though I know GameCube and a lot of those come out in the 2000s, but that's the generational cultural shift in games as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I also think I agree with that completely. I also think that the thing that the Nintendo DS kind of foretold was the explosion in video games in general, and that is through mobile gaming. Because you have to remember that the Nintendo DS released 2 or 3 years before the iPhone was even a thing, or
Yeah.
before the iPhone had an app store.
It's 3 years before the iPhone. The light beats the iPhone to market.
And so, like, this idea of accessible gaming
Yep.
that anybody can do with, like, through a touch screen.
America Ferrera can play it on set.
The DS was a vanguard for this. And eventually, those are the things that, like, ate Nintendo's lunch when it came to this kind of blue ocean strategy. Right. But at the time, the Nintendo DS was kind of like
they were the only one at the buffet.
Basically.
Yeah.
One thing we've got to add before we get into the A to Z's or the ABCs, just so nobody is disappointed. We're just doing part one.
This is
week.
part one. We're doing A through M today, and then N through Z next week. Because it turns out when we each bring 26 things to talk about, we're here for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's this is part one, and we will. Look, I think they're both going to be good episodes. To this point, I've only prepared my part one. But as I was like looking around and thinking about stuff, I was like, oh, but this has got to be my P. This has got to be my whatever. So I'm excited for next week as well. I think these are going to be fun episodes.
I think so too. And part of it is because the Nintendo DS is one of my favorite systems of all time.
Yeah.
And because it was like a time when I had a lot of opportunity to play video games, so I was playing a lot of video games on a lot of different systems, and being able to have a Xbox 360 and a PlayStation 3 and a Nintendo DS and a Nintendo Wii, like the different experiences you can have on all those different platforms. It really was. It was just a great time to be playing video games, and I have a lot of fond memories of the Nintendo DS.
Well, let's kick it off with the beginning of the alphabet. Mark, we're talking about A. Would you like to go first, or shall I?
Go for it.
So for my A, and look, what I'm about to say is going to sound inflammatory, but I don't mean it that way. America first is my A. The Nintendo DS came out in North America first.
Crazy.
It beat it to it came out about 2 weeks before the Japanese release of it. In Japan, it came out December 2nd, and in North America, it came out November 21st, both in 2024. Now, I understand that likely this is just a function of like the way commerce in North America in 2004 worked, that it needed to be out before Black Friday, and November 21st would be the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and therefore also the Sunday before Black Friday. And if it came out on December 2nd, that would be missing this huge shopping weekend during a time when that still really mattered. I think you and I had a conversation recently about how like Black Friday doesn't feel like it's the same, it doesn't have the same like impact now as it used to. This is when it really did have that same impact. So I think that's the only reason why it came out earlier in the US. But is there another example of Nintendo hardware, like main hardware, not like a revision or whatever, that came out in the States first?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't think so. Like everything else, like before that, Japan first makes sense, and then after it's like no global launch,
right?
For everything. So yeah, just a weird little artifact that it came to the Americas first.
My A is for Ace Attorney. So the Ace Attorney, like Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series, a series of like point and click adventure games, detective games. Yeah. I don't know what we call them.
Yeah.
I feel like I struggle with this every time we talk about any of these types of games. But because
he's not a detective, he's an attorney.
He's not a detective. There is a detective in the game.
Yes.
But you're like
Is that the game where Sherlock Holmes is the detective?
That is in the what is it called? That is
the Apollo Justice games?
No, that's not Apollo Justice.
Okay.
Apollo Justice is like a direct sequel. It's the one. It's like the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles that take place
in the past.
In the past.
Right.
Yeah. And yes, that series.
That's where Sherlock Holmes is. Okay.
Yep. But so the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney games had originated on the Game Boy Advance, but only in Japan. And they were local. The first three were localized for the United States for the first time on the Nintendo DS, and that's where I experienced them. And I love these games.
Yeah.
I have there's a lot of other parts of the franchise that I haven't played as much. But these first 3 games, hearing the music now, like there's a playlist that I go to on YouTube all the time that's like Phoenix Wright like study music, and I will listen to that while I'm working. I find it so like motivational. It is such a fun series, has a really good sense of humor. I like detective stories, or I like even if like crime solvey things.
Yeah, sure.
The characters are fun, the writing is fun. It's just a all around really good time, and I have very fond memories of playing it on the Nintendo DS.
And I mean, just sort of to like feedback to our narrative of like this being the sort of like proto iPhone like gaming device, that like all these games are available on iOS now.
Yeah.
So like that's the natural. It makes more sense for them to be on a phone. But like that didn't exist yet.
Yep.
So
Yep.
here they are on the Nintendo DS. Both of us with excellent A's here, I think. Mark, your B.
My B is for book.
Oh.
So one of the things that was
book mode.
Yes, especially looking back on the Nintendo DS, because we had this brief, even the 3DS wasn't really as experimental and inventive as the DS era was.
Right.
Where we had this first of its kind dual screened like gaming handheld console, and people were just finding new and interesting ways to use it. So instead of
and they gave it so many novel like input like ways to interface with it. But yeah, the sort of like book revelation that you didn't even need to hold it the way you think you needed to hold it,
right,
is wild.
And used in so many different ways. So sure, you had like learning games or those sorts of things like brain training, but then you also had software, because again, this was a handheld device for everybody. So you had software that was just, hey, here's 100 like public domain classic novels.
Yes.
And they're on this cart, and you can read books this way. Then there were games like Ninja Gaiden Dragon Sword, which you held in book mode, but still with the touchscreen on the right, and you were controlling the character that way, and everything was, like the action was vertical. Like
right, or like Rocket Slime, the Dragon Quest game, or Bowser's Inside Story, where you would like tilt it to the side and put it in book mode from time to time. Like there were a million different ways to employ and deploy this like book mode, and it was always cool when you encountered something that did it.
Yeah, and it was something that had like you could never do in video game consoles before, and you haven't really been doing since.
No, right. I mean, like the closest thing is remember there's that like flip grip for the Nintendo Switch where you can like put the Joy-Cons on like sideways, so that you're holding the thing vertically, so you can like emulate the sort of vertical,
like
monitor.
For an arcade like shooter or something like that.
Or really any like most like early Nintendo arcade games use a vertical monitor, like the original Donkey Kong does, and like a bunch of them do. So if you really want to play it in like the right aspect ratio without losing a lot of like screen real estate, that flip grip is the way to do it.
And I feel like if you want a clear understanding of the difference between where video games in the wider culture were in the Nintendo DS era and the 3DS era, it was that the 3DS, even though it had the same capabilities, was just not really used this way. There were not,
right,
I'm sure there were probably some, but there were not as many releases of just like, hey, here's books you can read, here are like cooking tutorials, like that sort of thing.
But like because it was a little bit more like more invested in like the AR of it all, right? Because it had the 3D camera, like the dual front facing cameras, and like that's the 3DS is where you have like the tour of the Louvre on it, right?
Yes, that is true.
So like there were, but not book mode, strictly speaking. Which,
there were still remnants of it, but the majority of that had moved on to smartphones by the time that the 3DS came out.
Right, absolutely. Because like you don't expect people to take their 3DSs to a museum unless they do Street Pass. Mark, my B is related. I thought about not having Brain Age be my B, but like, huh? Like it's Brain Age, train your brain in minutes a day, hosted by Dr. Kawashima.
Something like that, yeah.
Which was just I remember being like just absolutely obsessed with this thing. That when like not even really like was I having fun with these like tiny little brain teasing puzzles that would then insult me and say that my brain is 70 years old. I don't. I mean, maybe I was having fun. I also didn't really like. Is one of those things where you're like, I'm gonna make a routine of playing this every day because that's what it wants me to do, and you do it for like a week and then you forget about it, and then you play it like a handful more times over the course of like a month, and then put it away forever. But like, what a neat, cool idea, and what a thing that should have just been on phones,
Right.
or should just be on phones now that
And they are.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, right, but they're not Brain Age. They're like what are those like Lumosity or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yep. C?
Yes, my C. Mark, are you familiar with a Nintendo game, an unreleased Nintendo game called Cabbage?
No.
Cabbage was a game that was in development in the 90s at Nintendo. That was they were targeting the Nintendo 64 DD. And the game is described as a breeding simulator where players breed and raise small creatures that were called cabbages. Okay?
Okay.
There's a murderer's row of developers of Nintendo All-Stars that were working on this game, including Shigesato Itoi from the Mother series, Tencent, Tsukao, nope, Ishihara from the Pokemon series, Miyamoto, and Satoru Iwata, all working on this game. Itoi mentions the game in interviews as early as 1997. And the like big innovations for this game were that as you were raising this cabbage creature, there was a real-time clock, and it needed to write a huge amount of data about like how you were raising this thing and like affecting its behaviors, right? Hence the 64DD. Now, the 64DD was only came out in Japan, and this whole like concept got like too unwieldy for this all-star team of developers at Nintendo to actually like put it out this way. But it was evidently very popular within the ranks of Nintendo employees. Cabbage becomes Nintendogs.
No way.
Because it's all of the systems and like knowledge that they were developing for raising these little cabbage things that was going to be on your TV on your Nintendo 64 with the power of the DD to keep track of how well you're taking care of it. And they were like, hey, with the DS, we have all of that capability in this handheld itself. And forget cabbages. Now you just raise a dog.
That's amazing.
So now you know a little bit about cabbages.
Yeah.
Cabbage, singular.
That's so good. That's such a good C. My C is Chinatown Wars. Grand Theft Auto.
Yep.
Chinatown Wars. This was a Grand Theft Auto game developed by Rockstar, initially for the Nintendo DS. It was announced at E3 with Nintendo. And
this later came out on PSP, right?
It did. In fact, later, I think the year was released, it came out on PSP. And so it was in some ways a throwback to old Grand Theft Auto, like the original game, where it was from an overhead view. It had, this part was not a throwback, but it had cel-shaded graphics. It took advantage of the Nintendo DS's touchscreen for some of like the mini game components, like all this kind of stuff. It reviewed extremely well, and it sold very poorly on the Nintendo DS.
It's a case of like the market was Nintendogs and Brain Age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, even though there were so many Nintendo DSs out there,
yes,
it just the audience for Chinatown Wars was not there. Eventually was ported to, like you said, the PSP. They changed like the graphics. It wasn't cel shaded. They obviously didn't have the touchscreen stuff, But yeah, I remember when it was announced. I remember it being such a big deal because occasionally you would have these third-party developers who would take swings like this on both the Nintendo DS and the Wii, and it
it's just tough to find that market there.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think of like these sort of AAA style games, AAA style like console style games that were coming out around this time, either for DS or 3DS or even like the Vita and the PSP. Like I'm just thinking about games like Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker or that Batman Arkham Asylum Blackgate Penitentiary game, whatever it's called, Chinatown Wars, and just stuff like that. The Uncharted game that came out on Vita, Golden Abyss, that like they never really get represented or repackaged as like games on new platforms, even when they do collections, right? Like the that Blackgate game is never going to be on an Arkham collection, and it's just like why not why not trot these, like give them a fresh coat of paint. It'll be tough, but Nintendo's doing it with like Mario versus Donkey Kong or whatever, and just like add it like that's where the like forgotten classics are, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've talked about this with maybe a little bit different, but with the Mega Man Game Boy games, that those in all of the collections and repackaging that
there's never
Capcom's been doing recently.
Yeah, there's never been cause there are legacy collections for like every other every other Mega Man series, but just not the Game Boy games.
D. My D is for developer's system.
Ah, yes. One of the possible interpretations of the titular DS.
Even from the Nintendo of America, like FAQ for the Nintendo DS, they had an entry that, what does DS stand for?
Yes, I love this.
And this was their response. To our developers, it stands for developer system, since we believe it gives game creators brand new tools which will lead to more innovative games for the world's players. It can also stand for dual screen.
It can also. Which is so, like, because who do you think that question was being asked on behalf of?
Right.
Like on behalf of developers? No, on behalf of consumers. Guess what there are more of? Consumers. Yeah, it's I like that that there could be ambiguity. It obviously just stands for dual screen. There's that like two like rounded squares on top of each other, like one on top of the other. That's sort of like the logo for the DS. That is obviously just like the screens. Like it's referring to the dual screens.
I like it though. I like that the Nintendo DS, like the name Nintendo DS, was announced as the code name.
Yeah.
When the DS was revealed, and then it just eventually like became the name, because what else are you gonna call it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, otherwise you got to like make up something.
Like what?
I don't know. Well, I mean, that's crazy. But I guess like, were they going through like a naming crisis at that point? Like, I don't know. It's a GameCube.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, and also, not to stomp on any potential entries in the future.
Yeah,
but like the Nintendo DS, they were hedging their bets in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Right? Because they were like, no. This doesn't replace the Game Boy as a pillar. This is a third pillar.
Right. Which is nuts because it's backwards compatible and you're never backwards compatible between pillars.
Yeah.
Like if you're saying this is a different evolutionary branch, it can't be backwards compatible.
Yeah, but they were prepared for this thing to flop hard.
Yeah, I think you're right. My D mark is Dragon Quest IX Sentinels of a Starry Sky, which is a bizarre Dragon Quest game that they really want you to play with other people. It's sort of a proto MMO, and it's several years after like World of Warcraft, so it's not the first, but it's also like there was nothing like this on a handheld before, and no way that you were interacting with Dragon Quest like this. It's a strange little game where you play as like an angel who falls out of the sky, and you like build them up into your Dragon Quest class of your choosing, and you go on these like dungeon runs, hopefully with other people. But Mark, I know you played this game all by yourself, right?
Yeah, I love Dragon Quest 9. This is one that I am hoping that they've remade up to 8 at this point,
Yes.
and I am hoping that at some point we get a remake of 9.
Well, and this was another thing that I wanted to point out is that like this is a game that has not been even ported anywhere else. Which you say like they've remade everything up to 8, and they've also like 10. They've got that offline version coming out. Probably not here, but maybe that'll come here at some point. And 11 obviously has Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch. So like this is the only mainline Dragon Quest game that hasn't even been like remastered or
No.
ported anywhere.
Yeah, and this was my first Dragon Quest game, and
a crazy fact in and of itself.
I know. I absolutely loved it. Like you said, I played by myself offline, so I never experienced any of the like collaborative multiplayer parts of it. But yeah, I love this game. Love it.
It is the only DS game that I currently have in this house. A listener sent it to me, and I can't remember who. If it was you and you're in the Discord, I'm sorry. But shout it out there, and I will thank you on the next episode. I think I thanked him on the show already. But anyway, Dragon Quest 9. E to me now.
Yes.
So I'm gonna stay in the same area, and forgive me for this sort of like sideways approach here, but Enix, as in Square Enix, there were a ton. First of all, there's just so much Square Enix in general support on this thing, especially considering what Square Enix's relationship with Nintendo was at around this time, right? They totally bounced off of the Nintendo 64. There's not a Square Enix game on that system. And then like there's drips and drabs on the GameCube, and like there's not nothing on the GBA, but on the DS is really where Square Enix comes back, and in particular the like Enix side of that, which is to say all these Dragon Quest games. There are remakes of 4, 5, and 6 on DS. I already mentioned 9. There's Rocket Slime, which again also already mentioned, and Dragon Quest Monsters Joker and Dragon Quest Monsters Joker 2. That's so many of like games from the Enix side, plus from the Square side, Final Fantasy IV remake, Final Fantasy III remake, a sequel to Final Fantasy XII called Revenant Wings, a Final Fantasy Tactics game, The World Ends With You. Square Enix showed up to the Nintendo DS.
Yeah, in a big way.
Huge. They're just all over it. Did you use the game for playing a lot of those games?
Yeah, absolutely. I never played The World Ends With You, and still have not played it. Like, I know it's available on mobile. There was the remake for Switch ahead of the sequel and all of that. But that is one that feels like it's like when I didn't see Gravity in theaters, and I don't know that I'll ever see Gravity now. I feel like I should have played it on Nintendo DS.
You absolutely should have played it on Nintendo DS, because like its whole gimmick was you're controlling two characters simultaneously, one on the top screen, which you are doing with button inputs, and one on the bottom that you are doing with like gestures and like swipes on the touch screen. And I don't really know how they approximate that on other systems, but it doesn't seem like it would have the same effect.
Yeah. That's a great E.
Thank you.
My E is for ephemeral.
Ooh.
Because we've lamented on this show before, like forever is a really long time, but it doesn't look like we're gonna see a 2-screen system on the horizon,
unless you believe my predictions.
Unless you believe Patrick's predictions, which no reason you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But
also no reason you should.
But like looking back on it, the Nintendo DS and having those 2 screens enabled such inventive, unique gameplay.
Yes.
Sometimes in awesome ways, sometimes in ways that we look back now and like laugh. But it's such a interesting system that had such amazing games, and that form factor does not exist anymore.
Right.
And so playing those
Right.
games are always going to be in a compromised way.
Yeah. I mean, unless you have the original hardware. I still, we talked a long time ago about it would be so nice if they just had a system that was like a legacy handheld system that was just designed to play DS and 3DS games. That was like nice, that looked like a grown-up's piece of technology. That would be like sturdier than a DS, but not look like a doorstop in the way that like a 2DS would, and just like a store to download all those games. Because like yeah, it's sad to think that like, especially with the 3DS eShop gone now, that it's just like yeah, now you just like can't, you just can't these games are unaccessible.
I guess our one hope is that Analog or a company like that eventually creates a dual screen system that can play both 3DS and DS games.
Yeah. I guess that's but they're so far away from that, right?
It
like
feels that way, yeah.
And then like, what are you gonna pre-order and get it 4 years later? Mark your F.
My F is for 5 because that's the number of Nintendo DSs that I bought.
Yes.
During
the
Nintendo DS's life. So I owned an original DS.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got that for Christmas. And then when the Nintendo DS Lite came out.
Wait, so someone like went and got the game for Black Friday, like on Black Friday, probably for you?
I don't know when they got it, but yeah, my parents got me a
cool
original Nintendo DS, and then like 18 months later, when the Nintendo DS Lite was released, which if the difference between the Nintendo DS Lite was when the Nintendo DS broke out, because the original,
that's when it got cool.
The original Nintendo DS was ugly. Like it looked like a prototype. Like it was chunky.
Yeah.
It was like a tank. It was not sleek. And then
it was like if you took 2 Pop-Tarts and painted them black and connected them via a hinge.
And then
blue?
Nintendo was blue? Then Nintendo was like, let's just steal the Apple iPod aesthetic.
Yeah.
And it worked for them.
Mm-hmm.
The Nintendo DS Lite was a much sleeker system, was really cool looking. It came in like polar white or black, I think. I think it came in 2 different ones.
At launch, it was just the white. A couple months later, the coral pink and the onyx came out.
Got it. I remember the DS Lite being very difficult to acquire. So I remember checking Target like every day to see if they got shipments. Finally got one, so that's number 2. And then I got when Phantom Hourglass came out, they released a bundle that was a special edition
cool
Nintendo DS Lite that was gold, and on the top of it, it had the Triforce. It had a gold stylus, and then it came bundled with the game itself, and I bought that. And then I bought a DSi when that was released. And then I bought a DSi XL when that was released.
Why not?
And so that's the most I've ever bought of a single system ever.
Yeah.
And God willing, it will be the most I ever buy ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably pretty safe, right? Like, you're not much of a collector.
I'm not.
You have purchased 2 Switches at this point.
I have, and I've not quite as invested as I will buy anything Nintendo puts out this year, but I have said that I am not going to wait if they release like new hardware.
Right.
Or a hardware revision.
Right.
Like I'm just going to snap that up immediately.
By the way, update on that. I was able to secure a pre-order for my Sora
Congratulations.
Amiibo. I got that today. So I'm still, look, there's a set of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 amiibo, Noah and Mio, characters I do not know and probably will never know. But I'm still keeping an eye out if pre-orders pop for those. They come out pretty soon, so it's looking less likely that I'm gonna get that. But I feel like it starts with Sora, right?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
So that was the 5?
That's the 5.
Okay.
And I don't own any of them anymore. And what I was doing it because I did not have the money to just like buy 5
Yeah,
systems
you're
and
probably
hoard
trading
them.
them in,
So
yeah.
I was trading them in, selling them on like Craigslist or something. I really wish I would have held on to the special edition, the Zelda special edition DS Lite. And the fact that I don't own any of them anymore. I guess I still own a 3DS that can play DS games. But I don't like own any cartridges or anything. But I just really wish that I had held on to that Zelda Special Edition.
Do you want to borrow my copy of Dragon Quest IX? My F is for freeloader mode, which isn't what it was called. It was called like download play. But just the idea that you could play multiple people on their DSs with only one cart. You could play up to 8 people at a time in Mario Kart DS with only one person owning the cart. All the other players had to play as Shy Guys, but still you could do it. That's also the only way to play as a Shy Guy. There were just a lot of games like that allowed you to do this download play, which again, I'm calling freeloader mode. But that's, we had a conversation last year about my brother-in-law buying Switches for his daughters. And we're like, one of the problems with getting DS Lites for both of them is that if they want to play Mario Kart together, they both need a copy of Mario Kart. Guess what wasn't true with the DS? Only one person could have that cartridge, and you could both be playing Mario Kart.
Yeah, that was pretty sweet. I remember when that came out, just the idea of being able to do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that still exists sometimes. Like on one of the Switch Mario parties, something like that is possible, right?
Yeah, yes, I think so. I really do think that, especially for games that require like the two systems to talk to each other, to have multiplayer, that aren't like for like a Mario Party game. Like, why isn't that standard? That like don't make people buy 2 copies of this Mario Party game so they can play together.
Right.
F back to me. G.
Yes.
Okay. G. Hey, I'm a broken record. I love the Game & Watch support that is on the DS. Sort of unprecedented, and is the only place where Nintendo represents Game & Watch games as close to what they looked like as possible, right? Like using the power of 3D graphics to replicate what it would look like to have these like little LCD guys, hovering over the like art that's behind it. Obviously, there were the Game & Watch galleries before, which are extremely limited in their graphical presentation because they're Game Boy games. But every time Game & Watch games appeared on the DS, they tried to make them look like the actual hardware and what it actually would look like to play these games. Here are the Game & Watch, the astounding Game & Watch things on DS. Number 1. Game & Watch Collection 1, which was available as a My Nintendo Club like reward. You spent points to get this thing. It had 3 different dual screen Game & Watch games. They are Donkey Kong, Greenhouse, and Oil Panic. All great games. Greenhouse is my favorite Game & Watch game. So an incredible little collection there. Game & Watch Collection 2, which was also a My Nintendo Club reward, had 2 games on it. Parachute and Octopus, both are single screen games, but then there was also a mode that combined the 2 games. So you're like parachuting, and if you don't land in the boat, that it goes like into a game of Octopus, which is awesome. That game is not playable anywhere else except for on this free My Nintendo Club thing.
So did they like send you a cart? Like
yeah,
a game
send
cart?
a little cart. Yeah. Which both of these things are exceedingly rare and expensive if you want to try and find them now. But and then on top of that, the DSi, there were DSiWare versions of a handful of Game & Watch games. They are Ball, Flagman, Vermin, Judge, Helmet, Chef, Donkey Kong Jr., Mario Cement Factory, and Manhole. They're all single screen games, which I always thought was a little weird. Why not? It's a dual screen system. Why not show off some more dual screen games? But I mean, it's the first set of gold games, which are like classic, right? Ball, Flagman, Vermin, Judge, and then like Helmet is one of the like rarer ones, and then Donkey Kong Jr. and Mario Cement Factory are two of my like other favorites. So just on the DS and DSi, it's got like most of my favorite Game and Watch games, and I mean some of them are my favorite because those are games that I've been able to play because they were available on the DS. Again, I don't know why Nintendo is not like, since these Game and Watch galleries and Game and Watch collections and the DSi games, like they just haven't really represented them as playable experiences, and I don't know why.
My G
Mm-hmm.
is for game cards. So this is what the like carts that you would put into the Nintendo DS, like how you would play games. They were officially called game cards, and if you've never seen a DS card before or a DS game card before, they are very similar to like SD cards. Like
Now,
just imagine something like that.
Hold on a minute. Are you saying card with a D?
Yes.
But that's not what we said when we ranked them. We called them carts.
That could be true, but they're game cards.
What?
Yeah.
Hold on.
That's what Wikipedia tells me.
Okay.
And so what I think is interesting about this is that it's like the Nintendo 64 era with the PlayStation, but in reverse, where the PlayStation, the PSP, had used like these UMD discs, and so its handheld had to have a disc reader, and Nintendo had their game cards, which I'm going to keep saying until I am told otherwise. And they, like for a handheld system, the cards turned out to be the better choice because they like one of the problems with PSPs is that the disc reader would become unreliable. It would break pretty often because that is really fragile hardware in a handheld system.
Well, it's fragile hardware in like any sort of machine. Anything that has to spin a disc is going to naturally wear out more because it's physically moving. The rest of it can all be like electronic stuff. That's got to be mechanical.
And it's not that the PSP was unsuccessful, but you have to cast your mind back to a time before the Nintendo DS and before the PSP were released, and they were just announced. They weren't in anybody's hands yet, and it looked like to an outside observer that it was going to be the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation all over again. That the PSP was going to come in and eat Nintendo's lunch, and that is not at all what happened. The PSP, for as successful as it was, like didn't cast a shadow over the success of the Nintendo DS. And so just interesting to see that dynamic reversed when a lot of the variables were the same.
I will confirm game card is correct. Maybe I just got myself like twisted a little bit. Did we rank it as card before?
I can't remember.
I can't remember
either. We'll have to go back, listen to it, and then debug ourselves in
I'm
a
not
future
gonna do
episode.
That. I was just looking at the instruction manual for the DS Lite, and it is definitely the DS game card slot. So that's a game card is what they're and they refer to the game pack slot for the Game Boy Advance.
Yes,
thing.
This was when they made the transition.
Yeah. And also the game pack slot cover, that like big plug.
Oh, right.
That you just like jam it in there so that there wasn't a big gaping hole in the bottom of your system.
Next up is H, which is mine is Hero, as in Big Hero 6 Battle in the Bay, which was released October 28th, 2014. The last Nintendo DS game to be published.
Wow.
Almost 10 years exactly, by just like a few weeks from the system's release.
Wow. So they really wanted to put that Big Hero 6 game out, and we're like, we can't justify this being a 3DS game. That's
10
wild.
years.
That's wild.
That is a really long time. Like, and there are now like novelty releases for the Game Boy Advance or the original Game
Sure.
Boy or the NES or something.
We're not there with the DS yet, though.
No. But and so just to think that like new third-party games were being published for the Nintendo DS 10 years after it was released tells you how like many of those systems were out there. It's like how Just Dance was on the Wii forever.
Absolutely. Mark, that to me and what I'm about to say is evidence to me that H was a hard one for this system because I'm going with Harvest Moon DS cute. Harvest Moon DS, not a particularly well-regarded Harvest Moon game. It's the first entry in the series without the series creator, Yasuhiro Wada. But this cute version came out a couple months later after the original game's release, like 9 months later, less than a year. And it had a female protagonist, and a couple of the plot details were changed. It's called Harvest Moon DS Cute.
Not bad.
Not bad. I honestly, more releases of games 9 months later with the subtitle cute, please.
Hey, what changed in this one?
It's cuter. Old one, not as cute as it could have been. Which brings me to my I, and that's got to be Iwata, because Satoru Iwata was president of Nintendo at the time that the DS was released. It's the first piece of hardware released under his tenure as president of Nintendo, and we've already talked about how like it represents like a change in direction for Nintendo, that they would eventually have to like sort of swing back a little bit in the other direction, but like under his leadership, Nintendo makes this big change towards seeking bigger audiences and having more accessible gaming experiences. And I think his influence in that, making those goals of the company, can't be understated. And he was just such a cool guy. And I like to think of the DS as like an extension of his game design philosophy, and his like relationship to consumers is like expressed through the DS.
Yeah, that's such a good way of putting that. Well, another thing that I think is interesting with Iwata and his philosophies is he's also the one who led Nintendo away from like chasing top of the line graphics.
Yes.
The Nintendo DS, the Wii, like all of it has been even to this day, right? Like Nintendo games look good, the hardware is capable, but it is not bleeding edge. That was a very like
it's an intentional
decision by Iwata and Nintendo at that time to be like, they're diminishing returns in chasing graphical fidelity. We have to find other avenues to express ourselves in games.
Yeah, and other ways to be excellent at making games, right? Like a Nintendo game is never going to like have the highest fidelity, but like it can still look better than other games out there just because it's designed better. And yeah, it's just a different mentality, and he's not the only person there doing it, and he's not the reason why that's how Nintendo functions or how their priorities are like that, but he's a huge part of it.
My eye is for the Nintendo DSi, which was the second revision of the system after the Nintendo DS and the Nintendo DS Lite. And it, for me, was a novelty because the Wii was released by this point, and so a Nintendo system with an online store and like a home screen and all that stuff was not new.
Yeah.
But in having it in handheld form and the promise, maybe not like the delivery on that promise, but the promise of exclusive DSi hardware and like games and things that you could software
Yeah.
and games and apps that you could only access through the Nintendo DSi store. That was a vision I was sold on. It was thinner than the Nintendo DS Lite. It had cameras.
Mm-hmm. You could get those Game & Watch games on there.
You could get those Game & Watch games on there. But yeah, the Nintendo DSi.
Very good. I never owned one. No. The DSiWare games that I've played on my 3DS. And it was always just kind of nice that like that functionality carried forward on the 3DS. Of course, it's all gone now. But yeah, I think I'd sort of moved on from the DS by the time the DSi. What year did the DSi come out? Do you know?
2009 in Japan and 2010 in the US and
Okay.
EU.
So we were already like into smartphones and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the App Store existed by that
Yeah,
point.
so that's sort of the death knell for the DS.
My J is for JRPGs.
Sure.
We've
touched on it a little bit already. I apologize.
No, yeah, but in my life at this time, I was playing a lot of Japanese RPGs for the first time. So I would, I didn't own a PlayStation. I didn't own a PlayStation 2. So I had borrowed my friend, and I didn't have a backwards compatible PS3. And so I borrowed my friend's PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 1. I actually can't remember now. But anyways, I was playing so many of these classic PlayStation RPGs for the first time, like Final Fantasy 9 and Final Fantasy 8, like experiencing all of those. Plus, on the DS, I was playing the DS version of Chrono Trigger, which
I didn't mention before, yeah.
Right, which I think is like the perfect version of that game. You mentioned all the Dragon Quest games on there that I was experiencing for the first time. The Nintendo DS had a remake of Final Fantasy 3, which was the first time that a version of that game had ever been playable outside of Japan. So yeah, it was just it was like the perfect intersection between like what the Nintendo DS was capable of and what I don't know. I don't really know what exactly. Maybe it was just the popularity of the system and ease of developing for it. But whatever it was, there were so many games for the Nintendo DS.
Yeah.
And so many RPGs and so many. I think because it was still like cheap to develop for,
absolutely,
especially compared to companies who were spending a lot of money in the difficult transition to HD development in this generation. Here was the Nintendo DS that, you had these old library of games that could relatively easily be ported to it on a massively successful system worldwide,
where people were buying games too.
It just added up to an embarrassment of riches when it came to RPGs.
There's a sequel to Final Fantasy 12 on this thing. Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy.
Doesn't make any sense. My J, Mark, is jutting out of the GBA slot of the DS Lite. Because, man, look, you could play Game Boy Advance games on your DS Lite, but because it was far less chunky than the original DS, it was just, it couldn't fit the cartridge. It didn't fit all the way in, so it just like stuck out the bottom. I remember playing like Golden Sun on my DS Lite and being like, I can't like put it down, or like if I put it in a pocket, like it's got this extra appendage just sticking out.
That's really funny.
And they never really had a solve for it, and you wouldn't really want it because it would have made the system bigger.
Right. Yeah. That's really funny. I didn't use the backwards functionality of the backwards compatibility functionality of the Nintendo DS all that much. I think by the time that I had like a Lite, I probably like sold my Game Boy Advance library. I'm not even really sure what I must have sold it. I don't really know what happened to it.
It is weird that like backwards compatibility feels like it is relevant for like a year, and then after that it's like, yeah, who cares though? I'm not gonna like. I remember thinking the same thing about like the Wii U, of like, okay, well, I'll hang on to that forever because it'll also be my Wii, right? But like when you play a Wii game on your Wii U and like you got to put it into Wii mode, it just looks bad. It looks like I don't know, like slimy on the screen or something. And I feel like the same is true of like the 3DS using it to play DS games, where it's just like, this isn't right. And so even as like for like archivist reasons, it doesn't really match the experience of having the original hardware.
Yeah, for me at least, like, we've talked about on the show, I'm like, the next Nintendo hardware needs to have backwards compatibility with the Switch.
Yes.
And but you're right, it's like I love the idea of that, but never in my life have I really taken advantage of it.
Yeah, and I think the difference may be just like where we are with games now. Like, I will absolutely play a PlayStation 4 game on my PlayStation 5 and probably not even notice that that's what I'm doing, you know? So, like, I think maybe now the like difference in technology or like the difference in my ability to perceive things is such that like backwards compatibility now seems like pretty useful, but like from generations back, it's like the leaps were too big.
We're on to K.
On to K. Mike?
No, because I just did Nintendo DSi, right?
No. Wait, did you do a J? No, you did JRPGs.
Oh,
and
you're
then
right.
I did jutting out of the GBA slot. I'm right on this one.
You're right.
My K is Kageyama. Professor Kageyama, who is the person who hosts Professor Kageyama's Maths Training, the 100-cell calculation method.
Ah, yes, of course.
Released in the U.S. as Personal Trainer, math. Boo! This is a math training game on the DS, developed by Jupiter, the people who make all of the great Picross games. But yeah, what a name. Professor Kageyama's Maths Training, the 100-cell calculation method.
I bet if I had played that game, I'd be better at math. Because I would know the 100-cell calculation method.
Yeah.
But I don't know that right now.
I mean, it sounds like something out of an anime, right?
It does.
He has mastered the 100-cell calculation method.
Yeah. Much better than what was the American
Personal
name?
Trainer,
Boo.
math.
Yeah, boo to that.
I just want it one more time. Professor Kageyama's Maths Training, the 100-cell calculation method.
It's like poetry.
It is. It's wonderful. Now your K.
Okay,
Mark.
my K is for King because the Nintendo DS is the best-selling handheld and best-selling Nintendo hardware of all time. Not as much as the PlayStation 2. The PlayStation 2 is the overall champion.
People wanted DVD players. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, but the Nintendo DS has officially sold 154.02 million units over its life. That is a lot of Nintendo DSs.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, like, the Switch is a popular thing, but like it would need to like sell at the rate it's been selling for another like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, so the
catch up.
The Switch maybe will overtake it. It's currently at 132.46 million.
Yeah.
So it's about 22 million away. Yeah. So
right. Well, I guess like it sort of depends on what the next piece of hardware is called, and if they choose to keep counting it as Nintendo Switch.
If they pull a Game Boy Color,
yes,
and
that's
they
right.
just bundle it together. But I mean, it's difficult to overstate how successful the Nintendo DS was.
Yeah. Professor Kageyama's Maths Training, the 100-cell calculation method.
Well, speaking of professors, I'm going to do my L, which is for Professor Layton. A franchise that kicked off in Japan in 2007 and in the US in 2008, with Professor Layton and the Curious Village from developer Level 5, which has gone on to spawn, like 2 sequels that starred Professor Layton, and then actually probably more than that because it goes like to how Professor Layton and his ward, cousin, best friend, I don't know, little kid and companion, how they met.
Robin. Yeah.
How they met.
And Layton has also crossed over with Phoenix Wright.
Yeah. That is true in the Ace Attorney series. So the Professor Layton games, again, a series that I think now exists on mobile phone, but at the time could only exist on something like the Nintendo DS, and I don't think would have the life that it has had without the Nintendo DS. It's a puzzle solving game with like a narrative on top of it, like and it's presented in the style of like a mix between Japanese and European animation. The music is,
it feels very Tintin to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. The music is outstanding. I remember like the puzzles being a lot of fun, the story being interesting. I have not played one of these games for a really long time, so I don't know I know that they announced a new one recently, and I think that's still a few years off. But I have very fond memories of playing the original Professor Layton game.
Remember they made a like a Lady Layton game?
Yes,
There's a female Layton out there.
yeah. The series has gone a lot of different places for sure.
Which now to my L, which is going to be. Wait, hold on. I want to make sure I got the name of this right. I do. It is called Learn with Pokemon: Typing Adventure. Are you familiar with Learn with Pokemon Typing Adventure?
No.
Okay, so it is kind of like a the Pokemon Snap, right? Except instead of taking pictures of Pokemon, you are capturing them by means of typing on a keyboard. So it comes with a Bluetooth keyboard that connects to the game, so you can actually type, and like it teaches you typing, a la House of the Dead, or Typing of the Dead. Thank you. And so it like that's what it is. Now, Mark, you may be asking yourself, Bluetooth? I didn't know the DS had Bluetooth. It doesn't. How is this accomplished?
A dongle?
No, there's Bluetooth in the game card.
Whoa.
So this is a classic Nintendo thing of like, don't have enough technology in the hardware, put it in the cartridge. That's why Super Mario Brothers 3 is able to scroll diagonally. That's why a number of different things are possible.
Star Fox?
That's why Star Fox is possible. Yes, thank you for giving me a second example. I couldn't even think of a second. But yeah, there's a Bluetooth. The cart itself is Bluetooth enabled, which allows it to connect to this keyboard.
That's incredible.
And you can type.
Is it a full-size keyboard?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's like a Mario teaches typing, but for Pokemon.
So somebody could be using this keyboard to type at work right now.
Oh my god. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I assume it was designed only to interface with that game, but I have no idea.
Well, if somebody out there,
If someone out there, yes,
has this keyboard,
try it out.
And yeah, type us an email,
right,
with that keyboard,
and say it
and
worked.
let us know.
Right,
yeah,
and then like Pika or something. Learn with Pokemon Typing Adventure. Okay, and then this will be my last entry here. My M, which has got to be Metroid Prime Hunters. One of the stranger things to happen in this era was the Metroid Prime games were a great success by Metroid standards on the GameCube. Metroid was cool. Retro wanted to get in on making games for the cool new handheld, and so they made a like sort of 4-player online arena shooter in Metroid Prime Hunters that barely worked. The inputs for the game were like you move like forward and backward and strafe using the D-pad, and then you like change your perspective by like moving around with the stylus.
Well, and I'm pretty sure that the game, so the original DS that I had came with a demo
yes
for this, and I'm pretty sure that the game shipped with a thumb, like something you put on your thumb, so your thumb could act as a stylus.
Right.
And like input, yeah.
Right. And that same thing could work for like Mario 64 DS.
So that way you could like you could be holding your Nintendo DS with both hands and use your thumb to control the bottom screen.
Right. What did you ever have that weird little nub thing?
I don't think so, because I don't think it was included. My memory is that it wasn't included with like the demo. Only
right.
the full game, and I never bought the full game.
I had the full game and I didn't have this thumb thing, so I don't know.
Maybe it did come with maybe it did come with the original DS.
Or you had to like buy it separately. Maybe it was never packed in with anything. But Prime Hunters, I remember going to. So I was on vacation with my friends in Castine, Maine, and I remember going. This is like during the summer, and there was like not a lot to do, which was sort of like the point of it. But I wanted to play video games, and I remember going to the Castine Library, so I could sit outside and hop on their Wi-Fi with my DS and play matches of Metroid Prime Hunters against randos online, um, which is just a wild thing to think that I was actually able to do that with the DS.
Yeah. Man, this was something that they showed off in like demo reels from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And to show like, whoa, how cool and capable this new system was. One small thing I wanted to correct: Nintendo Software Technology developed it.
Oh,
It wasn't
not
developed
a
by
retro game?
Retro
Okay.
game. Yeah,
That makes sense. It doesn't really have the like retro polish. And I don't know that it could. Like I don't think the DS was capable of like displaying any polish that they would have applied to it. But so did you never played the full version of this game?
I don't think so.
So strange. Like the between it and Federation Forces, there's just this like weird offshoot of multiplayer Metroid Prime games that like no one likes. Feel like we need to get our hands on these things and play them.
Federation Forces for sure.
Yes.
Was this the only Metroid game on Nintendo DS?
Only if you choose to ignore Metroid Prime Pinball.
Which of course I don't, because
Right.
I know it'd be part of the theoretical Metroid Prime collection.
Yeah, well, so the thing that here, I'll just reiterate that the thing that I want to happen is for Nintendo to put out the Metroid Prime trilogy that is Hunters, Pinball, and Federation Forces.
Right. That's right.
The trilogy nobody wants.
That's right. My final entry for part 1 in our ABCs of Nintendo DS.
Wow.
Is Mario Kart DS. Still one of my favorite Mario Kart games. The first Mario Kart game you could go online with.
Yep.
The first Mario Kart game that introduced the idea of retro courses.
Yeah.
Had 4 cups of new courses, 4 cups of retro courses. It had like battle mode, and then it had a single player like mode outside of racing called missions, where you would have to do things like drive through gates, or you know, like drive through all of the gates in a certain amount of time. There would be like boss battles and things like that. It's such a I think it's one of the best Mario Kart games, but I haven't played it in so long that I don't know if it actually holds up that well. But I love it to death.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that like most like every Mario Kart game feels like a revelation, right? Where you're like, wow, this is what Mario Kart can be. But to experience this on a handheld system that is going online, like it's like a paradigm shifter where it's like that every Mario Kart game since then has been like, yes, of course you can go online. Yes, of course there are retro tracks. Like, yes, of course everything that's great about this game gets carried over into future ones. Mario Kart is not a franchise that is like known for huge leaps between entries, right? There's just like little improvements, little changes. But DS was like a thing where they like really made a difference.
Yeah, being able to go online, I just remember that feeling epic.
It's end of the world stuff, right? Where you're just like, oh, everything is different now. Yeah, a phenomenal game, and for a long time was like, it was like that. Brain Age and Nintendogs that were like, I just had those 3 games with me all the time and was always playing one of them. All right, well, so those are our A through M's of the ABCs of Nintendo DS. Mark, let's close this out. Gotta say, strange no one used their E for Elite Beat Agents.
I've never played it.
Okay, I thought maybe that was a Mark that was a Mark kind of game.
No, that I think it totally is. It's just one of the sad, I've just never had the opportunity to experience it type things.
That could be your Pikmin.
That could be my Pikmin.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Come back next week where we will be doing N through Z of the ABCs of the Nintendo DS. Thank you to our 16-bit patrons, Connor McCabe, Patrice Millette, David Hendley, Alias X, and Kyle Seaborn. We appreciate your support. We appreciate everyone's support. Remember, you can join our Discord if you would like an invitation. All you got to do is email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com, and I will send you an invitation. Anthony DeLuca made our logo, and our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying thank you for listening.